Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into tonight's event. Tonight, we're lucky to have with us Ross Gay, who will be presenting his newest poem titled Beholding. We're so grateful that you can make it tonight and continue to support our bookstore through this hard time. Tonight's event also includes a Q&A portion, so if you'd like to submit a question to ask Ross at any point, feel free to click the Ask a Question button towards the bottom of the screen, and he'll get to that towards the end of the event. And lastly, if you'd like to purchase Ross's books from Vromans, you can go ahead and click this green button right here that says Purchase Beholding, and it'll take you to our website. I'll go ahead and introduce Ross right now. Just a second. So Ross Gay is the author of 4 books of poetry, including Against Which, Bringing the Shovel Down, Beholding, and Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. He has won the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award and the 2016 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. Ross is a founding board member of the Bloomington Community Orchard, a nonprofit free fruit for all food justice and joy project. He also works on the Tenderness Project with Shayla Lawson and Essence London. He has received fellowships from Cave Canem, the Breadloaf Writers Conference, and the Guggenheim Foundation. And he currently teaches at Indiana University. So with all that out of the way, I will go ahead and let Ross take over.
Thank you. What? I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Are you hearing feedback?
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of that too. So what I would say is if you have headphones,
yeah, let me
try and pop those in. Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. There we go. Awesome.
All right. Thank you. Hey, everyone. It's good to be with you. I can imagine you. And I'm going to just read this for a few minutes, some of this poem called Beholding. So this poem that I have been writing for the last handful of years, and it has the one of the things that I'm focusing on is this move by Dr. J, who some of you know, some of you may not know, but you know, best basketball player ever. And I'm meditating on what is the best move by the best basketball player ever. For some extent, and then there's many digressions. But I'm going to read the first, 15 pages of it. It's one poem. It's like a 100-page poem. There's some pictures in it. And that's how that goes. There is a little about Dr. J thing in this book, and it's an opportunity for me to say who the doctor is, for those of you who don't know, about Dr. J. And let me say too, I'm so grateful to be with you and get to read a little bit of this with you. About Dr. J. It has occurred to me with much sorrow, though I'm getting over it, that not everyone knows who Dr. J, Julius Erving, is. I've learned this over the years as I was trying to write this poem and would occasionally be talking to, shall we say, millennials about what I was working on. Oh, I'd say vaguely, I'm working on a poem about Dr. J. In these encounters, I realized that many of these otherwise decent people had never heard of the doctor, though LeBron James et a few al, they had all mostly at least heard of. This strikes me as a generational ignorance, not a moral one. And for that reason, I begrudge these people, or you, if you are one of them, not at all. For I have never read Harry Potter, etc., etc., etc. And I feel at least in the realm of being a decent person. Anyhow, for this poem to be its most, whatever a poem might be to you, it might behoove you to do a teeny bit of research on Dr. J. You could just look at any of the video algorithm machines or watch The Doctor, a Dr. J documentary narrated by Chuck D. Or better yet, you could just ask an elder, which, incidentally, in addition to being someone who knows who Dr. J is a kind of tree or shrub from whose ripe black berries you can make a potent antiviral medicine, useful prophylactically and after infection. Bound in gratitude. This poem does not exist without the work and ideas and words of many, many writers and thinkers. Among them, Amiri Baraka, Garnett Cadogan, Toy Derek, Adeseli Skirmai, Saidiya Hartman, Alan Iverson, Fred Moten, Kevin Quashie, Patrick Rosal, Christina Sharp, and Susan Sontag, by which I mean the work and thinking and care and words are indebted to them and are sometimes actually theirs. And there's an epigraph, and the epigraph is from Christina Sharp's book, In the Wake, and it says, to be held, to behold. Beholding. You might have noticed there's nowhere to go. The wind cutting little eddies at your collarbones and behind your ear, as Dr. J drives from the foul line extended to the baseline, defended valiantly by Mark Landsberger, who, in this poem, despite the doofy urge. So let me just say, this is in the 1980 NBA Finals between the Sixers and the LA Lakers. The LA Lakers. As Dr. J drives from the foul line extended to the baseline, defended valiantly by Mark Landsberger, who, in this poem, despite the doofy urge to make him so, is not allegorical, but is rather simply a hard-working journeyman ball player with decent athleticism and size and a floppy mop of dusty blonde hair got caught up in the dust. Sliding his size 16s quick so that Doc, after catching the ball at the elbow and taking one hard dribble toward the baseline, where the dunk would usually commence, could not access the paint or the lane or the key, which is what we call the area nearest the goal, which in this case is an iron hole drawn in space and therefore implies a window, though the key also makes it a door that Landsberger, it seemed, was trying to keep shut. And so Doc leapt. He left his feet, which means more or less jumping with the ball with nowhere to go, and which were warned against by coaches from day one for the ensuing requisite stupid pass, or more simply, though no less stupid, travel, called walking, which the leaping often leads to. Keep your feet, again and again, which makes the leaping, leaving your feet, sound sacrificial. The way in certain places, certain countries or countries inside of countries, you must leave by foot with nowhere to go, which there is. And Doc, you should note, after the one dribble, clasps the ball with only his right hand without once at all in any shape or form using the left, which, among other things, friends, differentiates this move from all the descendant moves. Kevin Durant, Dwayne Wade, Steph, and Giannis, and Harden, and Kawhi. Yes, Bron too, I shall not be moved. And using only one hand, which is amazing but not yet miraculous, more a physical and therefore genetic fact, thanks Ma and Pa Irving, Doc's hand becomes an octopus, gripping the ball nothing like prey. And with that ball snugged in his mitt, Doc maybe kind of sort of thought something like, I am going to put this schmuck, the schmuck in this case being Landsberger, though do not please revert to a simplistic allegorization of the journeyman, which word I repeat advisedly, on a poster. Though schmuck is a word I'd be surprised to hear Doc say, and the word posterize, common usage, posterize his ass, you might be thinking is a bit of an anachronism in this poem, in this move, which ostensibly occurred in the 1980 NBA Finals, though we all know that nothing happens only when it happens. We all know nothing happens only when it happens. Emerging more in the epic, which in the NBA lasts 3 to 5 years, following Doc's retirement, Nick and Jordan, Hakeem the Dream and Clyde the Glide, Barkley the Glove, and yo, remember Sean Kemp? Though Doc probably thought it anyway, visionary that he was, when will they verb what I keep doing to these schmucks? Especially Bill fucking Walton. Driving from the foul line extended toward the baseline as the unsuspecting Landsberger, who did a fine job of shuffling his size 16s and not holding, keeping Irving from the key, and who must for a scant and fleeting moment have felt a degree of pride when Doc, after the hard dribble right, left his feet with nowhere to go. Billy Cunningham on the sideline, his hands on his hips, his sport coat thrown open, a few strands of hair stuck to his moist pink brow, and almost smiling as Doc began sailing out of bounds over the baseline. And Landsberger, a solid leaper, skied and foreclosed the possibility of Doc sneaking a shot in, this side of the basket, by which I mean dunking probably quite hard, by putting his hand against the backboard, a big door swinging shut, at which fine and commendable defensive effort Irving simply decided in the air to knock on other doors by soaring more. Have you ever decided anything in the air? Turtling his head into his chest so as not to bash it against the backboard. Flying like that, in fact, now behind the basket and backboard, where Kareem, a good help defender, wait a second, that was wrong. Kareem, one of the best defenders of all time, 5-time NBA All-Defensive First Team, 6-time NBA All-Defensive Second Team, 6 MVPs, sorry MJ, not to mention, which means it requires mentioning, Kareem was one of those Negroes they changed the rules for, banning the dunk for years from the NCAA, which is to say, banning emphatic and exquisite flight, which maybe explains the wise and sort of tired eyes of Kareem, one of the best basketball players of all time, who had slid to also cut off the baseline, which he accomplished, but found himself now looking into the sky directly out of bounds, which his own suddenly unfamiliar body must have been telling him was so weird. This is so weird. Looking and looking like this, his hands extended timidly, a silver maple's branches creaking and swaying in a hurricane. For Doc was amongst the trees, as we call the big men like Kareem, the trees, who reside mostly in the lane or in the key, growing there, rooting, the thousands of fans now holding their breath, looking into the sky, some of their hands reaching out instinctively toward their neighbors beside them, or their palms instinctively laying on the shoulders before them, or forearms shoved gently into a wrist or hip beside them, a few arms of strangers suddenly locked as if going for a stroll. The whole of the spectrum become a kind of dew-glistened web shivering its gems in the gales as Irving went higher and higher still, and now began to extend his right hand in a precise arc, beginning precisely above his head, painting a broad and precise circle, not unlike Leonardo's Vitruvian Man in his hula hoop of perfect proportions, if that little naked man wasn't little or naked and was palming a basketball and was flying through the trees. And I find myself again and again with my arm making the perfectly impossible circle, again and again, as I watch this clip on YouTube, frame by frame, clumsily, on a computer with gummy keys and a Post-it note covering the eye hole scrawled "Discipline" on April 5th, 2015, at 1:48 a.m. Again and again, thinking, what am I looking at? What am I seeing? Back to the first long step toward the baseline, the slight contact with Landsberger, the leap again, long step, contact, leap again, long step, contact, leap again, long step, contact, leap. And I noticed this time in the background, which is granted hazy, this being old footage and my eyes a bit roomy for the now nearly 2 hours studying this clip, I noticed at about the foul line, Silk, aka Jamal Wilkes, who, for the record, Coach Wooden, on the record, said was his best player ever at UCLA, not Kareem, and oh fuck forever, Bill Walton. And it's worthwhile to spend at least a moment with the name Silk, among the finest basketball nicknames, implying an ease and fluidity of movement, implying a difficult thing, a painful thing, made to look easy, a fiber prized for its softness, its smoothness on the skin, gathered from captive worms-fed mulberry leaves. My court name was Beast, for what it's worth. And after a summer league game at the court on 10th and Lombard, where those in the know would slide through a gap in the grimace of the wrought iron gate to get in, a court that would be in time shut down in the most heinous of ways, removing the rims, the backboards lonely as gravestones, because of complaints to the city from the condo owners across the street who did not want to hear, God forbid, all that Negro gathering and celebration and care and delight every goddamn weekend morning, all that frolic and tumult, all that flight. Why can't they just go someplace else? A slightly older opponent told me, holding my hand and shoulder and pulling me close, he was holding me. Beneath the stately oaks overhanging the court, looking kindly down on us, and time to time blocking a high arcing shot and wishing a leaf or two upon the ex-ballers on the sidelines, reading the Philadelphia Inquirer, sipping coffee, debating and laughing or acting stupid like refs making calls. Oh yeah, he walked his ass off. Hang on with that, I gotta plug in. It's one of my favorite lines in the poem. The ex-ballers on the sidelines reading the Philadelphia Inquirer, sipping coffee, debating and laughing or acting stupid like refs making calls. Oh yeah, he walked his ass off. The Oaks dappling the old heads and their discourse, the best line of verse I will ever write. His shirt soaked through, staring at me to be sure I was listening, which I was, then as now. You ain't no beast. You ain't no beast. You're a man. You hear me? And I noticed Silk's right leg and hip twitch before relaxing with what might have been the body's, aw, shit. Though if you look closely again and again in a certain kind of way, again and again, you'll see what might be a kind of light descending upon Silk's high cheekbone and forehead, again and again, unfurling almost across his face as he cranes his neck toward the soaring until you'd almost swear tonight at 2:26 a.m. he was looking into a tree strewn with people, the human-shaped shadows twisting across his body, the legs swaying into his torso, a gray hand birding across his face, resting for a second at his ear, the pinky become a beat from which wheezed a tiny song, you'd swear, watching this sliver of the clip again and again, the shadow of one man's head seeming to lay itself on Silk's chest, for which, in the clip, you'll see Silk make of his arm a cradle, lowering his head as though to say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. With which the tree makes a kind of choir, moaning, I'm so sorry. Twisting its roots in the molder with what they've been made to do. Wait, what am I looking at? What am I practicing? It's not that. No, it's not that. It's late. My eyes are playing tricks, for this tree is like the biggest uncle at the biggest family reunion, holding in its flung open arms 9 guys, both raucous and rapt, hollering and smacking hands and holding each other, cooing like lovebirds for the flight they're amidst, in one of the house's best seats at Rucker Park in Harlem, where the young, as yet unpseudonymous Julius Irving, just a college kid from UMass, has begun his extended course of study on gravity and grace, which has so enthralled the throngs. Some kids scale the court's chain-link fence, looking like belly-bared scarabs with bell-bottoms and Chuck Taylors. And some peer from the bridge beyond, the traffic itself slowed. And a couple hundred lounge precariously on ledges outside of school windows, backpacks tucked in their laps or under their butts. One boy laying on his side with a small stack of school books wedged beneath his close-shorn head, the algebraic equations tumbling into his ear as he looks drowsily on the court and beyond from the ledge, his left arm dangling and casting slow eddies into the air. And do you know, while composing this, I almost dreamed some doom upon that child, dozing beautifully in my poem, dreaming now above the flying. What am I looking at? What am I practicing? He sprawled there in the sun, easy as a lizard, while the gangly fella below, with knee-high socks and well-shaped fro and the wispy beginnings of a goatee and a mouth perch somewhere between "you better not" and "isn't this lovely?" With little fanfare, though no small delight, again and again flies to the rim, this time on the 6'9" post player, after having threaded and flummoxed the two guards at the foul line, and cranking the ball with one hand back far enough that if he so chose, he could have dropped it easily into the back pocket of his rather short shorts. The big man himself, a good player in the NBA, watching from below, holding his breath to see what I'm telling you about Irving's soaring, which is less its astronauticality and more the cast of the young Irving's eyes, which are looking somehow far past the metal backboards or the rim he would imminently rock the rest from, looking far past the chain link wrapping the courts and past the high-rise apartments and past the elevated tracks of the Metro North he rode to get here, and past the Hudson's muddy hall and the gulls swirling above in the gusts, and looking far past that even. The big man sees. It sees Doc seeing like that. The big man thinks, what is Julius looking at? Before feeling strangely entering into his nose and mouth the damp, salty air of a seacoast, which flashes him to Coney Island, where the night before he and his boys gobbled fries at Nathan's before strolling the boardwalk and 3 times fell hard in love, mostly with themselves, hugging and shoving blent unbeknownst into the ratty beach plum's fragrance, which the big man can tell this breeze isn't quite. Some as yet indiscernible difference as the coastal air's brine braids with his own salt and grime, during which he even looks at his own large hands, a gesture of doubt and faith both, sinking his face into them and inhaling and hearing again and again the soft exhalation of water scurrying onto a beach and tumbling back into the sea. The impossibly fine chatter of shell fragments rattling in the furrow, the sizzle of tiny crabs skittering across the slickened sand, and the wet kiss of seaweed unwrapping on a shore, and a softer sound still of water slithering through the reeds of a salt marsh. All of which, yes, is truly strange, I think. My Chuck Taylors sinking just so into the sand with wisps of beach grass shivering against my shins. This is so strange. As a human sound now comes from the water, or more, perhaps a net of human voices harmonizing with the water, threading with the lash of waves withdrawing into the collective hush of Rucker Park. You can see in the photos from the school kids' faraway gaze and the far cast of the men embraced by the tree, the soft grooves and crevices of their hands laid against the soft grooves and crevices of the tree, their human hands all gently grasping a limb as if to say, look, look, until they become one slow breathing animal with 18 legs and arms and 10 hearts, looking into the near distance where a human song was lapping from the waves, lifting from beyond an anchored and just listing ship, newly ballast free, barnacled and slapped at by breaking wakes, its tar-blacked boards whining and gasping even at rest, and waking from the song beyond the ship as though from the ship a woman looked somehow as though she was ascending a staircase. First, timidly, and then trusting the thrust of her knees and hips and 2 good feet, taking them by twos, bounding. And soon behind came someone else, bounding and soaring, and someone else, until the ship itself seemed to drag its anchor, twisting to sea. And the live oaks, too, turning beneath their shawls of moss, and the acres and acres of pines, and the people felling them and hewing them into planks for ships like the ones those now in the sky came on. Lean into each other and look, until it's gathered a small village above the low clouds, hovering now as much as soaring, their arms outstretched as if treading water, their hands and feet making small circles, their chains dangling and slicing rusty wakes into the air until one by one they shake loose and tumble from their ankles and wrists, erasing through the sky and into the sea like names disappearing from a ledger, hovering there like a school, looking down at us, watching. I'm gonna pause right there. So that's the beginning. That's the first, that's actually the first 28 pages. I can't remember what I said I was gonna read, and I'm gonna maybe show you a picture. That's an image from the book of Doc flying in Korean, in Landsberger. All right, so yeah, if you have questions, I will maybe pause for a minute and maybe I'll just read a little more, if not. So you got to type a question for me to answer it. You get 30 seconds or I'm going to start reading again. Let's go. Great question. Somebody said, has anyone else written a basketball poem? Yeah, there's basketball poems out there. There's some good ones. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit longer. Or actually, you know what? Maybe I'm going to hop to another part. Because yeah, I'm just gonna hop a little bit further. Someone wrote about Allen Iverson. That's good. My arms now cutting circles in the air, imitating again Doc's arms whirling, and I notice anew at 3:11 the precision and elegance with which Doc knows when and for how long to pull his head toward his heart. So this is one of the things that when you study this piece, is that Doc, when he does that move, he has to duck so he doesn't hit his head against the glass. Doc knows when and for how long to pull his head toward his heart so as not to smash it into the glass backboard, which would, at this speed and angle, hurt him bad or kill him. The goal-made missile by Doc's flight sailing just above his right ear, the daily evasion of which is, as you know, a version of genius. Like Donny Hathaway says of Stevie Wonder before covering Superwoman on These Songs for You live, the fender roads like water rocking in wakes above your body. Though he says it like this: from the black pool of genius, we'd like to give you our rendition of, which, though I think he was speaking nautically, like a swimming pool or a tide pool or a gene pool. Tonight I hear as the black pool of genius, as in the black tether of genius, the black rope, the black gravity, the black umbilicus of genius. Before Donny walks into wonder's song and makes of it something somehow like walking softly from the grasping hands of the sea. Oh, Donny, come back as a flower. Doc's head drooping, iris, tulip, violet, lilac, as though he were listening to some music no one else has yet heard, coming from his body, which you would likely miss if you didn't watch the clip as many times as we have tonight, during which it looks like Landsberger maybe fouled Doc by putting his big armpit nearly into Doc's ear. But truth is, Doc cleared out gorgeously with his left forearm to make for himself space through which to soar. Shout out to little Ronnie Free, who I coached at Piscataway High School. And when I went to block his shot, like I swatted all the other pipsqueaks, learning slowly to attack the rim from the corner, pump fake, 2 dribbles, fly to the rim, cleared out prophetically with his elbow, and laid 2 of my bottom teeth down, the ones going kind of gray and numb. His teammates all clutching each other. Ooh, he turned me into a window. As he kept running into the sky as though climbing a great staircase made of air with joy, which was not, though should have been, the name of the dance move my friend Timmy perfected the summer of 1989, as though climbing a great staircase made of air with joy. On the yellow curb where we put our little boom box and played that summer mostly Heavy D and Special Ed and Kwame and New Edition and Truth, the trillion ruby throats trilling their fleet wings inside our torsos, blazed with impatience and torch flower and bee balm, though it was wolves, were said were in our bodies. Wilding an animal. The wolves, we heard it. Even if we didn't know we heard it. We saw it. Even if we didn't know we saw it. And yes, we reeked of Drakkar and the magic stank musk of boys wildly alive. And Timmy would engine his arms and shoulders at first as though whirling into a quick cabbage patch before sinking into a squat from which he'd spin back upright while typhooning centrifugally, his head dipping to his chest as though evading something we knew but couldn't see. Little Astilbe, little Trillium, little Delphinium drowsing in the rain, to spread my wings and fly away to the place that I long for. Fast enough that in my memory the cinders spinning from the asphalt glowed, and a small fire would ignite, and Timmy became a twisting piston, falling, then flying, falling, then flying, which too he'd help me to do, holding my shoulders and helping me lower myself slowly, again and again, carrying me down and guiding me up. Forearms beneath my armpits from behind, our sweaty cheeks touching as though ascending a great staircase made of air with joy. Like this, he'd be holding me, struggling, for I was a corpulent pubescent. Before we both almost topple, we both almost fall, laughing hard, when my legs would finally give mostly out, and I'd bounce up to Roger Rabbit or Kickstep. And one night we went to Timmy's apartment to get some lemonade and look at his new drawings of the character he'd been perfecting the past year or two, KOR, aka the King of Rock. There is none higher. His folks tucked away in the den watching TV. And after he put the sketchbook in my hand of the iron creature with slits in the metal for eyes and stegosaurus spikes staggered the length of his steel suit's back, and while I was holding his imagination in my hands, Timmy reached into the cupboard beneath the sink and dipped his thumb and forefinger into a small box with a picture of a cartoon rat with X's for eyes, and slipping the pinch of poison into his mouth without wince, while looking at me, said, "To get stronger." Then offered the dead rat to me, reaching toward me as I fell away, holding my breath, my arms cutting wakes into the air around us. And what I haven't yet said is when watching the slow motion YouTube video, which kindly shows the move in something like real time before slowing it way down, so that you and I can study it like this and see what maybe is actually happening. There is a flash at 23 seconds, presumably from a camera anticipating one of Doc's miracles, though not this one. And in the slow motion video, the flash occurs precisely at the moment that Landsberger fulfills his obligation, detouring Irving from the key, and Kareem slides down with his long arm, preparing to toss Doc's shot somewhere toward oblivion. And you notice now, before the flash, Doc was probably just intending to dunk simply, though emphatically, on his side of the hoop, but was compelled to soar like this. We've gone over this. And in the slow motion video that I am now tabbing forward incrementally, studying forever each minute nuance of this Black person in flight, I notice, I see, the entire screen is blinded by that camera's flash, with only the faintest ghosts apparent. The red stripes of Doc's socks, his jersey's X, his jersey's 6, the red backboard square, but the rest of the court and the players on it invisible, pixelated, as though their real bodies have disappeared into the screen, as though their real lives have disappeared into the screen, and the disappearing has become their lives. And what I cannot help but think tonight at 3:33 a.m., a bit dazed, admittedly, from watching Irving's move again and again, is that this is like looking at the surface of the water from below. It's like looking into the sky through the water's slow turning above, where you can squint and see bodies looking down at you, their slow light snapped by one of the handful of photographers kneeling in prayer at the baseline. This, remember, before the ESPN era, which, yes, there was a before too. And inside of that flash where Doc nearly disappears, the airborne body becomes so quick the absence the light makes. I so badly want the flash. I want the light, like a virus blinding the screen and the flight in it to be a window or a door, which right now I will point you to. That's another pause. All right, so I'm going to pause there right now. And my headphones just went quiet. So maybe if someone wants to ask a question, that's going to be annoying for a minute, but I'm going to let my headphones I'm letting my headphones charge for a second until that echo. Unless anyone knows how to make that echo go away. I know the feedback. It's like a performance. How's that? It's better. Can you all hear me right now? Yeah. Okay, I'll have a charge here in a minute. Thank you, Maddie. I'm going to answer a couple of these questions a little bit quietly. So one of the questions. How's it? Okay. One of the questions says, was basketball your world? Is it still your world? Was it a piece of your past you hold dearly, or both? You talk about the subject so intimately as if basketball was someone you have always known. Yeah, basketball is really important to me, and it's important to me. I mean, for 8,000 reasons, probably. I was just writing a little piece about my father, who was, I can remember being a little boy. Me and my brother both remember this, and my dad, coming home from work and playing basketball with us as kids. What I want to say is dunking in his Roy Rogers uniform, actually. That's what I remember, which is fucking magical, and then I have so many sort of feelings about it, but I also, I feel like it's, I mean, the thing about basketball that's really interesting to me, and it shows up in this poem, is that it is a kind of place, it's a social space where all of this study and practice of working stuff out is happening. And I mean, I love to be on courts. Like, I would rather play a game with no refs, pick up basketball, than a game with refs any day of the week. And I would rather watch a game with no refs than a game with refs any day of the week. Same. And part of that is because I'm just very interested in the court as a kind of laboratory of care and curiosity and working stuff out, on the fly. The rules change actually every time someone gets on the court. There always is a kind of nuance to the rules of the game. And that, to me, the older I get, is more and more and more fascinating. That it's not fixed, and it requires every person sort of, every person is a part of the sort of practice, the part of the study of the game, the study of hanging together, being together, working it out. Then the other thing about basketball that also, the more, that it's a game, really, it's about many things, but flight is one of the primary metaphors of basketball. Like, flight is a crucial metaphor in this game. And, I'm interested in flight. Yeah, I'm interested in the imagination. I'm interested in survival. All those things which basketball also contains. The other thing I want to say, and it's also about, like, I'm writing this book, this nonfiction book of epistolary essays, back and forth with my friend Noah, who I play basketball with. And one of the things that I realize about basketball too is that it's a, it's the study of touch. It's really a study of touch, and at its best, or maybe always, but sometimes it's in the seams, but sometimes it's not. It's a study of, it's a game of care, So it's a game of touch and a game of care. And the older I get, the more I'm sort of looking in a certain kind of way, a way that I want to try practicing and looking, the more I recognize that this game is really a game about care. And the more I'm sort of able to orient myself around that, the more I'm able to sort of cultivate that game of careness in myself while playing the game and while thinking about the game. And maybe if I'm ever lucky enough to be talking about the game or sharing the game with other people, having that notion of this is a game of care first and foremost, that feels useful. That feels like meaningful, purposeful. Great question. One question is, what other players did you think about being the subject of this poem before landing on Dr. J? No one. It was Dr. J. It was, and partly because I studied Dr. J a lot. Partly because I grew up right outside of Philadelphia. Dr. J is so deep in my imagination, this formative figure in my imagination. I can remember plain as day when Dr. J retired. His last game against the Milwaukee Bucks, great team, Terry Cummings, Sidney Moncrief. When Dr. J retired, I went up to the school, Herbert Hoover Elementary School, right next door to the apartments where we grew up. And I shot, and I don't know if I was crying, but I felt like crying. I should have been crying. I wanted to be crying. And I was just heartbroken. And, I actually dream about Dr. J. So he's just way more important to me, sort of psychologically, psychically, like as an embedded figure in my imagination. So I never even thought about writing another, someone else. Though a lot of people come into the poem, and one of my favorite things to say is, "Yo, remember Sean Kemp," because remember Sean Kemp, my God. And then of course, some of the nuances, or not the nuances, the lesser known figures, Mark Landsberger, like that's a character who, my buddy Dave, my buddy John, like people who are a little bit older and maybe from Los Angeles know who Mark Landsberger is. But at the end, Iverson shows up. He actually, in a way, he shows the poem how to get on its way. So there's all that. That's my answer. Eva asked, what's the first word you wrote down? In my life? That's a great question. And I wonder if it means in my life. And if so, I don't know. The first word on this book, I don't know what that is either. But what I do know is that the first time I read is Danny and the Dinosaur. And I was sitting between my brother's legs, and he was showing me how to read. And then I was pretty little, and I started reading. My brother was showing me how, and I started reading, and my mother came over, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, my brother, Maddie, he probably said, he's reading. But I don't know what the first word I wrote down. Here's a question. Great question. What is your process when you write about physical motion, especially on the court? Are you watching old games? Are you meditating on flight? That's a great question. Shaki, that's a great question. I'm watching so much. I'm really watching. This poem, which is a long poem, and it's worth mentioning, as you could probably tell from what I read. that it's sort of about basketball, and but it's not about basketball. Except in as much as basketball is a place of sort of social life and study and care and flight and fugitivity and the imagination, but I want to also say this poem's about many things, and as you can probably tell. But I was studying these. I mean, this move in particular, like probably one of those things where you maybe I watched the move 1,000 times, but that's like slow. So trying to know every single aspect of the move and all of the sort of surrounding elements of it. And part of that, it's a sort of experience of witnessing and understanding, but it's also a really embodied experience too. So witnessing and then replicating in my body. So I mean, part of it is that, I know a little bit about basketball. I know how to play basketball a little bit. I know how to play basketball, but like Dr. J is a different thing. But I also know what a body does in space. I know like there's a moment where Jamal Wilkes, he sees Dr. J going to make the move and his hips twitch a tiny bit, which is his body saying, it's the body saying, oh shit. Like I know that stuff. But one thing that I found, and I read, it was in the part that I read, was that I was watching this move and my body was actually doing the move. And I don't know exactly what that means, except to say that my witness is probably very important, actually, as I think about this poem, which is, I'm still learning how to talk about it, actually, and think about this. My witness was occasioning my body's movement. So how and what I was witnessing was occasioning what my body was doing in time and space. In other words, sometimes I'd be watching that and I'd be like making my body do the move. And I think probably making my body do the move so that I could be like, this is like Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, but better, but that question is such an important question. I had not yet said the thing that question pointed me to, which is that, I want to say it again so I get it in my head, which is that the witness itself entered my body and became a kind of practice. That's sort of important to this poem. It's very important to this poem. Any other questions? How did you choose which Dr. J moments to include in the book? In some way, like I was trying to look at what I could see, like what I could study on YouTube, etc. And beyond the move was central, and that was already the thing. But I think in the travel of the poem itself, research sort of following the poem, I found myself at Rucker Park with Dr. J, and it did something with like sort of interrupting time. I think that leap from the 1980 move into Jamal Wilkes is looking into the sky, and then suddenly they're at Rucker Park, probably in the early 1970s, and it did something for the poem to leap into another time that was necessary for the poem. It's also really beautiful to look at. It's really beautiful to look at that this kid playing on these courts, and if you haven't, like I said at the beginning, like look at that, watch footage of Dr. J playing at the Rucker and look at the buildings, the photographs of these school buildings where there are like hundreds of children hanging off the building, watching Doc play. It's incredibly beautiful. It's incredibly beautiful. So yeah, that's that. I think those are really kind of the two moments. There's a little stuff at Rucker Park, and then it's just this move that's takes 2 seconds, 3 seconds for it to happen, but it takes 100 pages for it to happen too. Looks like a last question. Did you write all the Dr. J parts and then weave in the elements of life, or for you as you wrote, were they meshed together? Yeah, it's a good question too. No, I did not. I did not write all those parts first. I mean, this poem, I think maybe I said I've been writing this poem for 5 years, but it's longer than that. I've definitely been writing it since, 2015, but I've been writing it years, at least 3 or 4 years. Clearly, there are things that I've written that came into the poem from before. But then I think, I've been writing this poem since 1980 at very least, or way back. But I wrote. I did not write all the Dr. J parts first. I kind of wrote in the order of I think, I followed the poem. So the poem in some kind of way follows what arrived in the searching of the poem. In the revision of the poem, things kind of moved around a little bit, but for the most part, not entirely, things arrived as they arrived. So, there's quite a bit of Dr. J, and then I look at a photograph for a long time. Then I look at another moment. Then I look at another photograph, and then that photograph makes me think of another thing. And then I think about dancing with my buddy. So it wasn't like weaving things into the thing. It was trying actually to figure out how to get to the end of this 3-second move, with all that had to be inside of it. Something like that. Yeah, it's a good question. Hey, I think if there's any more questions or no more questions, I think we're at like an hour. But if anyone has another question, I would be more than glad.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has any other questions, we have about 5 minutes left. So last little moment to sneak your questions in if you'd like. Oh, Ross can't hear me right now. He's got his volume down. Hey, Ross.
Hey.
So it doesn't. Wait a second.
Got it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like there are any other questions, so we'll go ahead and just wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Ross. It was really nice to listen to your poem and hear you answer the questions, your thoughts on the book. Thank you to everyone for joining. But thank you so much, Ross. You were awesome.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming and listening. And it's great. And also for the questions, it's so beautiful just to have a chance to think through this book with you. Grateful.
Ooh, we have one more question if you want to answer it.
Oh, God. What did I learn through writing this book? That's such a good question. I'm in the process of learning it. I mean, one of the things, I don't want to say too much about it because I kind of want you to read the poem or listen to the poem when the poem comes, because I'll read the whole thing at some point. But I mean, one of these things, is that I did come clear on this thing of meditating on this game, basketball, as a site of care. I also got clear on this game of basketball as a sort of this sort of site of gathering, but also this site of practices of flight. and practices of the imagination. So, I mean, those are a few things, but then there's a lot about like witness, looking and witness, and practices of witness, and and more like Ashaki's question was so good to me, because it's a long fucking poem, and there's a lot in it, and there's things that I will continually learn, be taught by the poem. I think by reading it with other people, like that question made me realize that was a question about witness that I had not yet quite. I think the poem probably knew that, but I don't think I knew. So a lot, I learned quite a bit from this poem, and still am, hopefully.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Ross. You were awesome.
You're welcome. Thank you. Take good care.
Yeah, have a good night.
All right. Bye-bye.